So now what do we do to get out of pain? What's our plan of care to help this patient, AKA me, right? So like I said before, there's no medical red flags, and that's a great sign. So basically, I'm just going to keep sending it in the gym. I'm just kidding, but only kind of, right? Because if you don't have any medical red flags, it's a really good sign that you want to keep moving. We know that with lower back pain, it's super important that you keep moving after an injury, keep going to work, keep doing your regular activities as much as you can. Try to stay active while respecting the healing area. In low back pain, we think this is a self limiting condition, which basically means your body gives you pain. You don't do anything stupid, generally speaking, because it hurts so bad. And over the course of time, it just heals itself, right? Especially for disc pathology. And again, if you want to check out any of these studies, go ahead and check out the show notes. I have the links there. Okay. So, yeah, it's probably going to resolve over the course of time. And then what I need to do is modify my training and lifestyle activities to respect the healing injury. What's kind of cool is that pain actually does that for me, right? It's kind of a built-in alarm system that's going to kind of calibrate how much I do, govern how much I do over the course of time, and allow me to progress, right? It's kind of cool. Pain is a good thing, right? It's kind of hard to tell that to your patients, right? And tell them it's a good thing that they hurt so badly. But generally speaking, pain can be helpful, right? And then I want to slowly ramp back into my training and my exercise routine, right? We know that an active approach helps to reduce low back pain. And what's kind of cool is it doesn't really seem to matter too much what kind of active approach you take. So Pilates helps, yoga helps, walking helps, strength training helps. All that stuff is really beneficial for low backs, right? And if I apply a strength training program, I know this is going to help to reduce my recurrence rate. So obviously, I've been struggling with low back injuries lately. I said 3 to 4 since the birth of my son, which is a lot. So I want to make sure I reduce my recurrence rates. On top of this, I love strength training. So if I can continue strength training, right, keep working towards my goals, and on top of that, that's going to help me A, get out of pain, but B, reduce the likelihood to have pain in the future. That's a huge win-win. All right. So if you're the type of physical therapist that works with an active population that loves working out, keep them working out. All right. Don't stop them. We just have to be smart about how we do it. And I'm going to show you how I did it with me. So the next piece is that you want to stay positive. Okay. I'm a physical therapist. I deal with low back pain every day of the week. I have so many people that come with low back pain. I know that if you don't have medical red flags, this is something that's probably going to get better over the course of time. We don't have to worry very much. This is going to get better. Okay. However, when you're dealing with low back pain, this can feel like the most emergent situation in the world, right? You can't do anything that you want to do. You can't sit, you can't stand, you can't move, you can't concentrate. Okay. One of the things that I experienced over the past several weeks is that it was extremely hard for me to do any sort of work. I couldn't focus. My back was taking the focal point of everything I was doing on a regular basis. And this plays huge psychological mind games with people, right? And for folks that have a high athletic identity, they don't feel that they can do anything that they love to do. They can't do fitness. They can't do strength training. They can't deadlift. They can't squat. And that's all wrapped up in their sense of self-worth, right? So if you're like me and you really care about your ability to deadlift a lot of weight, you feel that you lost a major piece of what makes you you when you have this big injury, and it sucks. So I think it's really, really important that you have empathy for your patients, okay? Because we know that this is going to get better over the course of time, but they don't feel that way, okay? So we have to do two things. We have to instill hope in them that they're going to get better. You have to let them know that statistically, yeah, you're going to get better. For most people, it's going to get better. And it may feel absolutely terrible, but we know that this is a part of low back pain. It gets better over the course of time. But on top of that, you still have to have a lot of empathy, right? You can't just belittle all their pain. They're going to get really pissed off at you. So you have to strike this balance of instilling hope, being positive, all right, but not belittling their pain, okay? So, and then the last piece for me, and I do this for all my patients, that we have to figure out, let's say, why someone got hurt in the first place. And we want to try to avoid any prior mistakes, right? I love this saying that the body keeps a score, right? So basically, pain and injury is your body's way of trying to protect you. And over the course of time, your body is more apt to give you pain, right, in the future if you do things that are similar to how you got hurt in the past. All right. And that's just your body's way of protecting you. It's an awesome thing that the body has. It's a good thing. But unfortunately, that also means you're more likely to experience more pain in the future. So I just have to be smart about my training, be a bit of a detective, try to figure out how I got hurt in the first place, and try not to repeat those past mistakes. All right. So, how do you fix lower back pain during squats and deadlifts? So, I already did a very in depth show on this. I'm going to put the link in the show notes, and I'll put a link here you can click if you're directly on the screen if you're watching this via YouTube. I have 4 steps to success. All right. Number 1 is to modify and or temporarily limit aggravating training and lifestyle activities to allow the irritated lower back to calm down. Number 2, identify and correct mobility limitations in the ankle, hip, shoulders, and thoracic spine to reduce stress on the spine if you have any sort of limitations. Number 3, correct technique issues in the squat, deadlift, and Olympic lifts. And for me, it's also going to be for running, okay? And not as much for the squat, deadlift, and Olympic lifts because my technique is pretty good and I'm actually not doing much in terms of Olympic lifting right now. So I'm sorry if this video is a bit of a bait and switch and I said that I was doing rehab and a weightlifter. I like lifting weights in the gym. I'm currently not doing Olympic lifts, okay? And number 4, start gradually loading the spine through a progressive strengthening program, which is basically just going to be progressive overload for the spine. And lastly, you just want to have a slow transition back to your prior program. Now, let me show you exactly how I did this. So, first step, modify aggravating lifestyle activities. So, what hurt me, especially initially? Prolonged sitting was a big one. I didn't actually realize this until I tried to sit for a long time. So I hurt myself on Sunday, and then I just kind of got on with my life. And, I'm lucky just because my daily job and career and activities don't require me to do a lot of sitting for a long period of time, besides sitting down and recording these podcasts. It's kind of funny. So I didn't even realize that my low back didn't tolerate sitting for long periods until about 5 days after I injured it. And then I was dying after trying this. Okay. And I knew, okay, well, I got it. I shouldn't be sitting for a long period of time. Right. Like my body told me, my brain told me, like, hey, stop doing that. Like, okay, message received. So I started sitting with a posture that was slightly extended. Okay. And that felt a lot better. So with your patients, you can tell them to have, let's say, a towel roll under their lower back. You can have them just extend a bit more when they're sitting. Sitting in a higher seat over low seat usually helps a bit with this. The other piece is that any form of hinging really, really bothered me, which honestly was kind of hilarious if you were watching me trying to treat my patients, because basically I needed to stay stark upright for everything, right? So basically, if I was trying to lean forward over my patient, do any sort of manual therapy, I could not. So I just looked like I was 103 years old every single day. And that's okay. It's part of it. So it's, everyone gets low back pain. They're going to go through this. And, it's funny to me, hopefully other people around me thought it was at least a little bit funny too. Right. So initially I stopped doing that. Okay. The other thing that killed me was lifting and carrying my son. And for a little bit, I just didn't pick him up. And, he cried a little extra. And, I apologize for that, Luke. I'm sorry. If he wanted to be held, I'd say, hey, Luke, come over here to the couch. We would sit down together and I would just hold him from there so I didn't have to pick him up. Right. So luckily that resolved over the course of about 2 weeks and I was able to pick my son up again. And at work, I have to do a lot of lifting. I lift dumbbells, barbells, plates because we're working out with my patients all the time, right? And what I did was I just basically modified things as best as I could with my biomechanics, right? And I had the students help me out. I said, hey, I got a patient coming and they got a deadlift. You mind helping me with the weights? And they said, yeah, no problem. And that helped a lot. And like I said, these first 2 weeks, I limped around like a weirdo. It was slightly hilarious. If I dropped something on the floor, I did that stark upright torso. If you ever had low back pain, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where you can't bend forward. So you do this like weird split squat thing where you try to get down to the floor without bending over at all. And you grab your pencil that you dropped and then you come upright really quick. And, it just looks funny. But yeah, that was my way of respecting my spine in the first 2 weeks or so, so that over the course of time, it can make some progress. Right? Just talked a lot about what hurts. We also want to talk about what helps because early on in the rehab process, doing more of what feels good and staying away from stuff that aggravates can really help people out a lot from a pain perspective and from a psychological perspective. I knew that my spine liked frequent position changes, right? So the first 4 days after my injury, I didn't have to sit for a long period of time. And you know what? My spine really liked that. And then when I had to sit for a while, my back hated that. Okay. So I knew that I needed to do more position changes throughout the course of the day. I also knew my spine really liked low level exercises. So I always felt quite a bit better after doing some walking, some cat camels, bird dogs, glute bridges, side bridges, plank variations. So I actually did that several times per day. I'd wake up, do some of these exercises. Sometimes during lunch, I'd do a few of these exercises. Then in the evening, I'd do it as well, just because it made me feel so much better. And it's probably helping me get better more quickly. Here's the other piece: time. Time helps folks with injuries. Most folks are going to get better over the course of time, regardless of what they do. Okay. Time is that element that helps. And really, 2 to 3 weeks into this injury, I didn't have to modify anything in my lifestyle anymore, right? I could pick up my son, I could bend forward, I could do, I could take out the trash, I could do all the basic things I do regularly in my daily life. And I was feeling pretty good. So you also have to modify your training to respect and rehabilitate the injury, right? And for me, running was what hurt me. And then when I tried to run after my injury, I couldn't do it anymore. It hurt too badly. Okay. But here's the thing: I want to keep my training as similar as possible as what it was written as, so I can keep making fitness goals over the course of time. And I don't want to get deconditioned at any given time, too. So I want to try to keep my conditioning up and my running training up as much as I can while respecting the injury, right? So normally I run twice per week. I have one day that has some steady state with a tempo run in the middle, followed by some steady state. And then I also have an interval run, which is the same thing. So some long, slow, followed by an interval, followed by some long, slow, right? And the first week when I tried to run, just didn't happen whatsoever. I remember the first time I tried, I live in a neighborhood that has a lot of hills, and I started walking. I'm like, oh boy, my back is really sore, right? And I remember trying to go up and down some hills. My back was like, nah, dude, I don't like this. And I tried jogging for a little bit, and it was actually quite painful, maybe like a 5, 6, 7 out of 10. And I was kind of thinking, well, maybe it'll warm up. And you know what? It just didn't. So yeah, I had to respect my lower back. My low back kind of won that day from a running perspective. So I just walked, right? I tried to walk quickly when I was able to. I also found that I had to really walk on a level surface. My back was just not tolerating any sort of hills. I had to kind of walk slowly initially, right? But over the course of time, I got better and better. And I found by week 3, I was actually able to run. And I couldn't run fast. My back didn't like that. So week 3, I did 2 long, slow runs, which was great. By week 4, I was able to get back to the swing of my normal training. So I was able to do a tempo run as well as an interval run. So for the tempo runs, all I did was I knocked a minute off my minute mile pace. So I went a little bit slower than usual. My back was fine with that. And on my interval day, I did the same thing. I went a little bit slower than normal on my interval. And I also increased the interval duration. So it went from about a 3 on, 3 off to a 5 on, 5 off, simply because for 5 minutes of running, you can't run as fast as just 3 minutes of running. So I slowed it down a little bit. And week 5, I was more or less back to my normal training. I could actually follow my running programming, although I was out of shape. So naturally, things were a little slower just because I ended up having to take so much time off from running. But the other piece is I try to maintain my fitness as much as possible. So I think if I stopped running completely, I would have been in a worse place, right? Both from a rehab perspective, because your body adapts to the stress that you throw at it. So I think trying to run this entire time actually helped me heal and rehabilitate, and also keep my fitness a little bit higher, which is going to help me in terms of long-term getting more fit for my 10K. But the other part is that if you have an injury, basically your body is used to dealing with a certain amount of volume of training. And then when you get hurt, you have much less volume of training. And then when you start feeling better, if you go right back to your activities prior, you just spiked your training volumes. So I think when you're trying to rehabilitate from an injury, if you can continue exercising as much as possible, you're less likely to spike your volume when you return, right? Makes sense. So the other thing I had to modify quite heavily was my weightlifting, right? And normally I will strength train 2 to 3 times per week. I do mostly total body sessions. I'm much busier than I used to be. I can't spend as much time in the gym as I'd like to, maybe at some point in the future. For right now, I am working 9 to 5. I am also running an online business. I do traveling, speaking. I'm trying to publish, courses, books, all sorts of stuff at all times. I'm very, very busy. I have a family, all that stuff. So basically, I work out 2 to 3 times per week, total body sessions. I actually follow the programs I sell at Fitness Pain Free. If you want to check out my training program currently, it's Ain't Nobody Got Time for That, which I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to follow along with how I train, right? I have that for you. So generally speaking, I want to keep all of my training as similar as possible while respecting the healing injured area, my low back, right? What that means is that I'm going to have to pretty aggressively modify certain movements, and other movements I don't have to modify very much at all, right? So when it comes to the upper body, my upper body strength training, I don't have to modify very much, just because, bench press doesn't really bug me too much as long as I bring my legs up on the bench, right? So I turned some of my dumbbell work into barbell work. And the reason for this is that taking heavy dumbbells out of the rack was a no-go, right? However, if I just put a bunch of small plates on a barbell and I just took it out of the rack and, let's say, bench press, that wasn't bad at all, right? When it came to single arm rows, that did not feel great on the spine. So I just substituted a chest supported row instead. Problem solved. My bend over rows, not happening, right? I couldn't bend over initially. Turn those into pull-ups and or pull-downs, which were tolerated quite well. And then for the bench press, I just put my feet up on the bench, right? So extension-based low back pain, when you're bench pressing, especially if you have an aggressive arch, it doesn't feel great on a spine that doesn't handle extension very well. So I just picked my legs up, right? And any incline work, I had to make it a little bit more flat just because that compression on my spine didn't feel phenomenal, right? But really, I didn't have to modify much, week or two, and then I was back to all my normal weightlifting for my upper body. Now, the deadlift is just another story, okay? The deadlift was something I had to heavily modify, right? I want to show you my program leading up to this injury. So basically, the deadlift variation I was doing this month was a barbell Romanian deadlift. I was already modifying a little bit because my back was a little bit tweaked, but that wasn't limiting my ability to lift in the gym. So weeks 1 and 2, the goal was to do 4 sets of 12 of barbell Romanian deadlift. I was able to get through this. This was before I really injured my back. And then at the start of week 3, boom, injury occurred. Running, back hurt a lot, and then I can't even bend forward, right? I'm trying to continue training as normally as possible while respecting this injury site. What can I do that's similar to a deadlift? Not much, right? One of my favorite exercises for people that are really irritated that can't deadlift is going to be a hip thrust, okay? I couldn't tolerate any hinging whatsoever, but I could do some glute bridge stuff. So what I ended up doing was a sandbag hip thrust, and I used a 30-pounder, and I just did high reps with it, nice and slow, pause at the top, get a little work for the low back, get a little work for the glutes and hamstrings without aggravating things, right? Over the next few weeks, I was able to tolerate a little bit more. So week 4, I was doing a kettlebell TRX hip thrust, which I can load a little bit heavier, and I was actually able to go down in repetitions. So the load goes up, repetitions go down. Generally speaking, injured low backs, myself especially, can't tolerate a lot of loading. So you start with higher reps and go down to lower reps just because naturally as the reps go down, the weights go up, right? Week 5, I was actually able to tolerate barbell hip thrusting, right? So the loads are going up more and more. I was pausing at the top still because I couldn't use a ton of weight. So I do 135 pounds, 165, 175, 175 for 10. So you can see those weights are going up a lot more than the sandbag hip thrust at the very beginning, right? And that following week, I was able to tolerate some high handle trap bar deadlifting, although I used a tempo. So 2 seconds on the way down, 2 seconds on the way back up again. And the weights are actually still pretty light for me anyway. So I started at 135. I worked my way up to about 195. I made the decision at 195. That's about all my back is going to handle for that day. And then the following week, I was able to handle some low handle trap bar deadlifts for sets of 10s and 12s at around a 7 or 8 out of 10 RPE, right? So another great way to reduce the load and still get a training effect is just to do a lower RPE. So RPE, if you've never heard of it, is a rating of perceived exertion. I use this all the time to prescribe intensities for my patients. So a 10 out of 10 is the most challenging set you could ever do. 0 out of 10 is like nothing. Most people are constantly training somewhere between 8 or 8 to a 10 out of 10, I'd say, depending on the person and their personality, right? So I just took a few notches off of that. I started at 205 and worked up to 245. My back was not hurting. I would probably working in the 300 to 400 range. So just give you an idea of what I was tolerating at that point, right? And after about week 8 or so, and I'm actually at the week 8 mark, so who knows what I'm going to be doing next. My back pain will determine what I'll be doing. But I think my next planned exercise is a snatch grip deficit deadlift. I'm going to go into the gym next week and I'm going to give it a go and see how it goes. And if I'm feeling great, I'm just going to do the prescribed sets and reps for the day. If I'm not, maybe I'll elevate it a little bit to just a regular snatch grip deadlift. Maybe I'll do an RPE, maybe I'll do a tempo, depending. So far, I'm actually feeling pretty good. I can hinge again without too much pain, and I'm progressing back. So it's pretty cool, right? How about the other lifts in the gym? How did I have to modify the squat when I initially had that injury? So if you take a look, and I apologize if you're listening to this via podcast, I actually have my workouts for 8 weeks all written out. So if you want to check out and see exactly what I did, see the exercises, see the plan, and see how I modify things, definitely check out the YouTube video for this. So 2 weeks prior to the injury, I was doing transformer bar squats. And if you don't know what a transformer bar is, it's an awesome piece of equipment made by Chris Duffin. So it's basically an adjustable safety squat bar, which is pretty cool because you can theoretically have the same torso angle and hip position as, let's say, a goblet squat, but you can load it up a lot heavier, right? And it looks like a safety squat bar, which is really cool because my back tends not to tolerate too much kind of low bar back squatting more recently anyway. And the safety squat bar allows me to be a little more upright, which makes my back and my hips feel quite a bit better. So first week, 2 weeks, I was supposed to be doing 4 sets of 10 and things were going really well. Even though my back was sore, it wasn't limiting my ability to get better each week. The injury happened week 3, right? So you can see right here, got injured. And squatting did not feel phenomenal. But after a long warm up, I was able to tolerate some body weight squatting if I really elevated my heels a lot. Okay. Couldn't really tolerate much else. So one of the things you can do, which I did that day, to try to get a training effect when your injury is not tolerating loading, is you do blood flow restriction training. And this is cool because in some of the research we have about blood flow restriction training, it actually gives you similar improvements in strength and hypertrophy as regular loading. And this has even been studied in a powerlifting population, which is awesome because I love powerlifting and my training is kind of similar to them. So in my mind, I knew, well, I can't squat heavy. That stinks. I don't want to lose progress. What can I do to continue working towards my goals while respecting this area? Can't tolerate any loading. What can I do? I can do BFR. And that's exactly what I did. Elevated the heels, makes your torso more upright. Usually that's a little more friendly for the spine. I had to use a bit of a tempo. I couldn't go that fast, but I was doing sets of 30, 15, 15, 15. And I lived the fight for another day. And I'm still increasing the strength of my lower body. Awesome, right? As I got better, I still did BFR for another week, except now I could add a little bit of load. So I was holding a sandbag out in front of me while I squatted and kept the sets and reps the same. Week 5, I was able to tolerate a little bit of loading. I was doing a pause goblet squat. So the pause is going to decrease the weight that I can use, which actually worked out pretty well because I couldn't handle a whole lot of weight. As you can see, I was doing sets of 12 repetitions, and I started with 12 kilograms, worked my way up to 18 kilograms. On that day, I knew that my back wasn't going to tolerate more. The following week, I was able to get rid of the heels elevation and just do regular goblet squats, a little bit controlled. So still a little bit of tempo, right? But not as slow as the prior week. And I worked a little higher. So I was able to work up to 24 kilograms doing goblet squats, right? Week 7 and 8, I was back to doing safety squat bar squats, right? So this came back. My squat came back a little faster than my deadlift, which is pretty common when it comes to low back pain. So I was doing safety bar squats again with 135 to 155 for sets of 10 to 12. Week 1, prior to hurting myself, I was doing 160 to 180. So I'm still not quite back to where I was before. And this is due to some deconditioning, but also due to my back still hurting me a little bit. So over the next few weeks, I'm sure I'm just going to increase the speeds, increase the loads, and hopefully be back to my regular training in another week or two, right? So what other exercises in the gym did I have to modify to respect the lower back injury? Well, a couple that were interesting to me. First was the leg press. So right after I got injured, I was supposed to leg press maybe 5 days after I got the injury. And I thought that this was going to feel terrible, right? One of the things I tell my patients all the time is don't expect movements in the gym to feel bad. Try them, warm up, go slowly, of course, but if it feels good, go for it, right? So I kind of thought the leg press was going to go poorly for me, right? At the time I couldn't even pick up weights or plates to like put them on the leg press machine, right? And then like getting down on the floor was like a catastrophe, right? If you watch me move, you're like, this dude is 36 years old, but looks like he's 112 years old, right? Because I was in so much pain. Well, what's funny is that, I'd hobble into the leg press, right? Do this really weird hand on one knee, grab the plate, slide my knees forward, try to keep my torso upright to pick up a plate to put on the leg press, right? Looking like I'm 130 years old. And I'd get into the leg press to actually do the movement. And lo and behold, it felt pretty good. And that's always funny. But yeah, I loaded things up. I would recommend maybe using smaller plates to load up the leg press if this is you, right? Lifting up 45s doesn't feel phenomenal. But it was kind of cool because I was able to hit a new rep max for that week. So I didn't have to go down in weight whatsoever or modify the leg press. And I think this is really important point. So in folks with low back pain, especially folks who have a high athletic identity, their sense of self-worth is really wrapped up in being strong and fit. If you can find exercises to help to train their lower body and train their spine a little bit and allow them to keep making progress in the gym, this is an enormous win, right? Because you can show someone that, hey, you can still train. We can still get under some heavy loads and get some work in, right? And so some folks, so for me, I didn't feel the need to leg press 3 times per week, but you can make the argument that for someone that tolerates leg press, but nothing else, just leg press 3 days per week, because you're still going to get a lot of great lower body strength training in, and it doesn't seem to bother the low back, right? So this was a really big win for me. And I had to practice what I preach a little bit because going into the workout, I really didn't think the leg press was going to go well, but it did. So there you go. Another movement I had to modify was a front rack reverse lunge. That was what was prescribed for me for the day. I write all my own programming. Like I said, I follow the Ain't Nobody Got Time for That program that I sell on my Fitness Pain Free website. I'll put the link in the bio. But I was supposed to do front rack reverse lunges. And I'll tell you what, I couldn't tolerate any sort of loading. So I ended up picking up some light dumbbells and doing some lunges. That was not working either, right? Even taking a stride didn't feel great. So what I stumbled on initially that I was able to tolerate that day was some blood flow restriction split squats, right? So if I just put some BFR straps on and do body weight split squats, that actually felt pretty good on my lower back. So that's what I did initially, 30, 15, 15, 15 reps each leg. It feels like death, right? One of the things that's so awesome about blood flow restriction training is that you allow folks that feel like they can't do anything because load hurts so bad to get a good training effect, right? And if you haven't done BFR before, usually you're pretty dang sore after you do it. So it's kind of cool. You have these folks that have terrible low back pain, haven't been able to work out for weeks. You have them do some BFR training, they get super sore the next day and their back is not killing them. And that's a huge psychological win. People are like, wow, I can actually work out again. That's really cool, right? And that isn't just for low back. I find that for all sorts of injuries all over the body. It's one of the reasons why I like BFR so much, right? Over the course of time, I was able to tolerate a little more loading. I eventually progressed to a safety squat bar, a split squat, right? So I wanted to get a little compressive loading on my spine to drive some adaptations, right? I want to be able to squat and deadlift eventually. So I started compressing the spine via safety squat bar during split squats. And over the course of time, I just got better and better, and I was able to get back to front rack reverse lunges, no problem. So step 2, identify and correct mobility limitations. So I've done a lot of assessment on my own body over the course of time. Historically, I have trouble with thoracic spine extension range of motion. So really my warm up, I just put some extra T-spine extension work over roller. The other place where I historically have some mobility limitation, which can directly affect the spine, is ankle dorsiflexion. And it's really my right ankle that's a little more stiff than the other. And generally speaking, I do full range of motion calf strengthening several times per week. And I think that's where I get the majority of my mobility for that area, right? But here's the thing for me, I'm generally mobile enough for my activities in the gym without causing any sort of significant compensation, which is going to overstress the spine. So I didn't really have to do a lot of mobility in my rehabilitation. And you only really need to if folks are not tolerating certain positions that are occurring because they're stiff. Okay. So that's important. Don't guess that people need mobility, assess them, and also use your brain, right? So if you're stiff in your shoulder, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to put more stress on the spine. But if you're really stiff in your ankles and when you squat, your hips go really far back and you have a ton of butt wink and someone has, let's say, flexion basal back pain, then yeah, maybe we want to try to clean up their ankle dorsiflexion a little bit, get them to squat a little deeper without as much flexion, get their torso a little more upright, right? So they feel a little better when they squat. For me, I didn't need to do that. Plus, I gained artificial ankle dorsiflexion by adding a giant heel lift the first couple weeks when I was so painful. Step number 3, correct technique issues. So for me, I've been squatting and deadlifting since I was like 12 years old, right? I'm 36 years old right now. You would think I would have this down at this point. And generally speaking, I think I do. And the reason why I got hurt, I don't think was a technique issue in any way. We already talked about those potential mechanisms. If anything, I hurt myself running, and it probably is because of overextension, right? And it's funny because when I was growing up, I actually did cross country and then track in college, and I'm a big runner. I like to run, right? So for me, I always tried to increase my step length running because I felt like that was how I got faster, right? And this is me as like a 14-year-old. So I don't know how to get faster. I'm just kind of thinking in my own head. So what I did to get faster was I tried to take bigger strides, right? I remember running on the sidewalk and just trying to increase my stride length as much as possible. If you have a really, really long stride, it's probably going to make your cadence slower and it's going to make you overextend the spine a little bit more, right? The other piece for me is that when I'm on a treadmill, when you get tired and you want to keep going and you have a hard head and you're stubborn, you don't turn the speed down. You keep the speed high. And then my compensation is just to overextend, right? So I can keep up with that speed. And for me, I overextended. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got hurt. So as I started to resume my running, I always do this anyway, is that I use a metronome just to make sure that my cadence is a little faster so I'm not overextending when I run. The other piece is that I try to get my ribs down and lean forward a little bit so I don't overextend when I run. And those are a few key cues that I use to make sure that my spine is in a little bit of a better position for me so I don't hurt myself over the course of time, right? And my favorite step is to gradually load the spine. So fourth step in getting out of pain and back to training is to load the spine, right? And basically, I just did strength work 3 times a week prior to my training in the gym, right? And the reason why I did it before is because for me, doing these exercises made my back feel a lot better. So I was able to handle training a little bit more easily. Now, for the average person, if you do a whole lot of, let's say, intense low back drills prior for your training for the day, it might fatigue you out to the point that you do worse with your training. So what probably works out well for the majority of folks is that early on in rehabilitation, do your strength work beforehand because it's pretty low level. It's not that challenging and it probably makes you feel a little bit better, right? And as you start progressing along in terms of rehabilitation, so as you're getting stronger, pain levels are going down, you can put your rehab exercise at the end of the session, okay? So I did a bunch of different exercises. So I love hip thrusts and folks have low back pain. If you want to see my favorite exercises for rehabilitation of the spine, I'll leave a link in the show notes. Do keep in mind that a variety of exercises can be beneficial for folks. So when I say these are the best exercises, doesn't mean that they're the only exercises, right? Or even that they're that much better. They're just my favorites and the ones I like. They've been movements that have been really helpful for my weightlifters over the course of time, right? However, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's a variety of exercises that work equally well. So keep that in mind. So initially, I wanted to do some sort of hip thrust couldn't do very much in terms of hip thrusting. So I started with body weight glute bridges. As that started to feel better, I put a sandbag on my lap to increase the challenge to the spine. And as that felt even better, I did a kettlebell hip thrust with a TRX strap, which was well tolerated and really hit my lower back and glutes, right? The next exercise variation I did a lot of initially was clamshells. So I wanted to target the glutes a little bit of the lumbar erectors. So I started with a side lying band around the knees, good old clamshell. And over the course of time, I progressed to a half side bridge clamshell, which gets the spine on board, makes it a little more challenging. I also did plank variations, started with a normal plank variation, worked my way towards marching with my feet. Eventually was able to march with my arms. And eventually I did a plank with a plate pass underneath my body, which just makes it harder. I also did a lot of mini band side steps. I had to start with a mega upright torso just because bending over felt terrible. Eventually I could bend over a little bit, which I did because that stresses the spine a little more, which is the thing we want as we improve from a rehab perspective. Eventually I add a kettlebell offset. So basically taking a kettlebell in one hand only and racking it while I do the mini band side steps. And what's nice about this is that you're still getting all the benefits from the side step, but the kettlebell is trying to bend you over towards one side. So adding that offset will allow one side of the core to work a little bit more, which we want, right? We want to try to stress the spine more as we get better. And lastly, I had a pull through in the mix, right? And initially, I couldn't do a pull through whatsoever. Once I was able to tolerate any sort of hinging, I just did a body weight good morning, nice and slow. Okay. That was my initial exercise to start tolerating hinging, right? As I started to feel a bit better, I was able to do a pull through, but I had to do it slowly with a tempo. And lastly, as I continue to progress, I just went a little bit heavier. Okay. So, like I said, I did these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exercises 3 times per week, 2 to 3 sets of, let's say, 10 to 12. Over the course of time, I made them more challenging, right? And after about 6 weeks or so, I just stopped doing these movements just because I'm getting a lot of spine loading in my general training. And then I also don't think I need to do these for the rest of my life. However, I probably will need to keep some strength exercises in my program over the course of time to keep my spine nice and strong, to decrease the likelihood that I'll experience more back pain in the future. Because, hey, I've been getting recurrent low back pain. I probably need to make sure my back is nice and strong so I don't hurt it again in the future. And I also have to be really cautious about those prior mechanisms we talked about and just try to make better decisions in the future so I don't get hurt again, right? So here's what I want you to do next, guys. If you enjoyed this video so far, I have an entire course. It's free. It's called the Fitness Pain Free Mini Course. And we go over 3 lessons going to help you take a lot of this information that we went over so far and put it into practice. The first lecture is called Why We Need a Better System. So first and foremost, the way we treat fitness individuals, all right, athletic people in the gym from a physical therapy perspective is pretty much broke, okay? So we need a better system to serve the folks that are in the gym that get hurt, they want to get back to training, all right? Lecture number 2 is called 7 Reasons Why People Get Hurt in the Gym. And essentially, we have to know the reasons why people get hurt in the gym so we can keep them safe in the future, right? And when they get hurt, we have to know why and how to get them back to training in the gym. Okay. So a thorough understanding of this is very, very important. I actually have a really cool infographic that goes along with this lecture that you get for free as well. And lastly, we go over a case study of how to get someone out of pain and back to training. So these principles are all phenomenal, but we don't actually put it together and you don't understand how to create a program to get people back in the gym and keep them safe for the long term, then we lose, right? So I'll put a link in the show notes for this. It's a Fitness Pain Free Mini Course. Definitely check this out.